Chapter 10. Who is the Queen?
Looks like even the unfathomable Mr. Naegi is starting to get demoralized.
Tsumugi stood by the window, obviously pointing out the words "study hall" written on the board. Kaito didn't pay attention to her, instead fixing his gaze on Kaede. There's just one person left, he kept telling himself. He was more on edge now that there was only one person than when there was 11. As soon as Kaede stood, he did too, startling Kokichi up in the front row. She walked in front of the smaller boy and held out a black envelope. "Mr. Ouma, this is for you," she smiled sweetly.
"Oh, is that an advance notice?"
Tsumugi called. Kokichi hesitated for a minute, grasping the envelope. Kaito put his hand on his shoulder and took the paper out of his hands. "You are invited to a tea party. Felicitations on your ever-continuing success. I am extending this invitation because I would love to have you. Please, rest easy." Kaede clapped her hands in front of her. "This is not an advance notice, just an ordinary invitation to a tea party tonight." "A tea party?" Lights and sirens surround him as he ran. "I've lost sight of him! Be careful, he's armed!" Korekyo Shinguji hid behind a wall, a pair of blood-stained scissors in his hand. "It won't be long, Kichi." "Maybe if I talk to her, and I mean really talk to her," Kokichi mused as he stepped out of the shower. "Do you think she might give up on killing me?" He glanced up at Kaito, who was sharpening his knives nearby. "Why do you think you can negotiate some sort of truce with her?" the taller boy asked. "Maybe I won't even have to bring it up." He wrapped a towel around himself. "You never know. That could be the whole reason Kaede invited me in the first place, right?" "Don't be stupid!" Kaito stood sharply. "This isn't just a tea party. She's the last assassin left. Do not drop your guard." "Right. Sorry." "It's okay." He sighed, ruffling the smaller boy's still wet hair. "First, we'll try talking to her. And if that fails, I promise I will keep you safe." "Hey." Tiny arms wrapped around his waist. "Thank you." The blonde-haired woman watched the exchange through her hidden camera feed with a smile. Suddenly, a voice broke the little moment. "Ugh, who the hell was that? Pardon me, Miss Enoshima? Are you in right now?" Oh, it was Naegi. "There's, something I need to discuss with you. Do you have a quick moment?"
"Why, of course. Please come in."
Miss Enoshima giggled. Mukuro had her voice down pat. Ah, the advantages of having a twin. "Thank you." She watched through the camera feed as Naegi entered. Mukuro was seated at her desk, dressed in identical clothes from the ones Miss Enoshima wore. "Hello, madam."
"Well, let's hear it."
Mukuro leaned forward on her elbows.
"Feel free to speak your mind."
Yes, ma'am." Naegi nodded. "You see, this is about Class Black. It's down to just 4 students. Is it all my fault? Is it because of my incompetence that they all transferred out?" Her twin tapped the desk twice, silently asking her what to say.
"Calm down. It's not your fault in the slightest bit."
She sighed, listening to Mukuro repeat the phrase. "You're an exceptional teacher. In fact, you are the perfect teacher. You must simply believe in yourself more. Only you could have been entrusted with something so demanding and precious as Class Black." You think so?" Oh, naive little Naegi. She knew so. "She actually sent you an outfit to wear?" Kaito raised an eyebrow at the almost costume-like set of clothes before him. "That snobby brat! What the hell is she plotting?" "A dress code is normal for such a fancy party, right?" After Kaito made sure nothing was hidden in the clothing, he let the smaller boy duck into the bathroom to change. He came out in a pair of white pants with a matching jacket. He also had on a black shirt and a purple vest. He kept the scarf around his neck, like usual. So, how do I look? Adorable. Kaito? What? You asked how you looked. I gave you an answer. Stop! Korekio snuck down the halls, searching for Kokichi's room. He was stopped by a quiet voice behind him. My, if it isn't the long-lost Mr. Shinguchi. He turned around to find Kaede standing there. You can't be serious. To be such a sore loser is disgraceful. He whipped out a pair of scissors and pointed it at the blonde assassin. Shut up! I'm going to be the one that kills Kokichi! He shouted as he lunged. She merely held out a hand, stopping the scissors in their tracks. Quickly, she took a hold of them. He watched, in a sense of disbelief and horror, as she easily crushed them into pieces. Although, you have gone through a lot of trouble to get here. She clasped her hands together. It's only right that I should invite you to my tea party tonight. The two boys stood side by side in the elevator. Feels kind of weird, huh? Kokichi rocked back and forth on his heels, letting her hold a tea party on the top floor. Have you never been invited to this kind of fancy party before? Kaito asked, trying not to stare at the smaller boy. No, this is a first for me, he giggled. How about you? This is a first for me, too. They reached the 99th floor shortly after. As soon as they exited, they were greeted with a lavish-looking staircase and huge double doors. And at the top of them, it's amazing! Kokichi gasped. To think there was a room like this at our school! It was built for this very day. Kaede descended the stairs, dressed in a light purple gown. The Akamatsu Music Foundation made a contribution to Hope's Peak Academy and received a portion of the top floor, which they then renovated. Kaede! Good evening. The blonde assassin smiled. I'm glad you made it. I've waited so long for this. Her eyes landed on Momota and turned a touch cold. I see Mr. Momota has decided to tag along. Damn straight. He crossed his arms over his chest. I came here to keep him safe. It's just that you weren't invited. Her nose scrunched up elegantly. How appallingly ill-mannered of you. I'm not going to your party if Kaito can't come with me. Kokichi pouted. It would be way too boring if it were just us two. I suppose I have no choice. Kaede sighed. Well then, both of you, follow me, please. She walked in front of the set of double doors as they ascended the stairs. This is the hall where our party will be held. Everyone else has already arrived, you see. The door swung open, revealing a long table with people seated at nearly every seat. Our class! Kokichi cried. The only classmate who couldn't make it was Miss Shirogane. Kaede floated over to the head of the table. And I went through such pains to invite her. The door swung shut, and there was a distinctive click of a lock. As we discussed earlier, my family's foundation was given full use of the room by the school, she explained. The floor is entirely ours tonight. If we wanted, we could raise quite the commotion and never be disturbed. She noticed the glare Kaito was throwing her way. Please, the hateful looks. I can assure you that there's no need for any animosity. Come, let us make our way to our seats, shall we? I prepared the highest quality bread and tea cakes. The two boys shared a look and nodded. The true nature of their classmates' presence there became clear when Kaito got a closer look. They're puppets? Almost all of them were, anyway. At the far end of the table appeared to be Korekio, in a straitjacket, with a gag over his mouth. What the hell was he doing here? And now, I shall present a riddle. Kaede sat up straight and poised, like a princess. Perhaps Mr. Momota would care to entertain us by attempting to solve it. What do the worker bee and the rabbit have in common with each other? What is that supposed to mean? Kaito frowned. Well, thinking about it is precisely what makes it a riddle. Right, Mr. Ouma? Miss Akamatsu. Kokichi sucked in a deep breath and leveled his gaze with the assassin on the other end of the table. I'd like to speak with you. Really? Kaede cooed. About what? Let's put an end to it. He appeared to almost mirror her straightened poise. I'm sick and tired of Class Black. You see, we can stop this needless bloodshed. What reward do you want, Miss Akamatsu? If at all possible, I'll gladly give it to you. Oh, will you? She laughed softly. The reality is, the reward is something only you can grant me. The clans the two of us come from, they're really one and the same, you see. I think, if this were all simply a riddle, we might just be the giant hornet and the ghetto spider. Upon seeing that his determined look hadn't faltered, she giggled again. You have rather keen eyes, the eyes of a true queen that has been to hell and back. Or king, in your case. I understand. You see, I've been targeted since I was young as well. Came close to death many times, in fact. I suppose the both of us should be commended for surviving. But only one of us can be queen. And it's not you. When I murder you, everyone will acknowledge at last that I am supremely powerful. And that is what I truly desire. A red card appeared in her hands. The advance notice. Kaito stood, his chair knocking over. I'm just putting all my cards on the table, so to speak. There's really no reason to be so anxious. The walls began lifting up, revealing an arsenal of guns, knives, rocket launchers. Everything. I have readied all manner of weapons for us. Kaede stood as well. With a swoosh of fabric, she ripped off her dress. Underneath was some sort of battle uniform. Let's begin. Allow me to make the first move. The puppet representing Maki leapt at Kaito. The tall boy whipped out his gun, shooting the thing straight in the forehead. Kokichi, just stay there, he commanded. Puppet Rantaro and Kirumi ran towards him. He dashed to the wall and grabbed a semi-automatic machine gun. One by one, he shot them down. You just stay there and keep my other guests company. Kaede pushed a button on a remote. A pane of glass began descending from the ceiling. He growled as he saw the assassin approaching Kokichi. Kokichi! Kaito grabbed a long strip of cloth, tying one end in a loop. He threw it in front of Kaede's feet. The minute she stepped into it, he yanked it backwards, causing the fabric to tighten around her ankle. He began to drag her back to his side of the room before the glass hit the floor. Kokichi ran to the glass, pressing his hands against it. You've left me no other choice. Kaede glared at him as she stood back up, ripping the cloth around her ankle. I had intended to keep you out of this so I could defeat Mr. Ouma without distraction. I will not let it happen. So sorry. She glanced back at the boy behind the glass. You just stay put. We shall continue our duel once I am finished with Mr. Momota. She leapt into the air as she shouted, Don't expect me to hold back! He pulled out his pistol, firing twice at her. It should have been easy enough to put her down. But of course it wouldn't be. She crossed her arms in an X, the bullets bouncing off her skin like they were rubber. There's no way, he muttered. She landed in front of him, her elbows catching the top of his head. Suddenly, he was thrown into the wall across the room. Kaede was in front of him in a millisecond. He pointed his gun at her, and she grabbed the barrel. With impossible strength, she crushed it between her fingertips. How was she that strong? She drew her fist back with a grin. He was barely able to dodge it in time. The wall crumbled beneath her fist. Kaito! He heard Kokichi cry. Kaede turned to him with an amused smile as she threw a chair so hard against the glass that the wood split apart. That wall is custom-made, with a practically indestructible form of bulletproof glass. She closed her eyes. Even if this entire building came down, that wall would still be in a single piece. She once again drew back her fist. Kaito grabbed a piece of the wall that had fallen and used it to stop her in her tracks. When she drew away, her skin was peeling off, revealing a black, shiny exterior. She didn't even seem all that shocked or even displeased. She got off him and stood at her full height. I do hope you're prepared, She smirked. Then, in true Dragon Ball Z villain fashion, she said, "I'm going to show you my true form." A few steps back, and she tensed up her entire body. Her skin and clothes began to tear and fall away. Her arms and legs were made of metal. Wire popped out of her elbows and thighs, wiggling as she moved her fingers. Kaito ducked out of the way as she lunged at him, once more burying her fist in the wall. No wonder she was able to do that. "I am invincible! I am the true queen, the supremely powerful! And you will see that as the truth once I'm done with you!" He tried to grab a knife from the wall, but it was kicked out of his hands. He didn't notice it land next to Korekio's still bound form, laying on the floor. He didn't notice the masked assassin roll over and begin cutting at the back of his straitjacket. He didn't notice him getting up off the floor and grabbing a machete from the wall. "Kichi's great and all, but Kaede is a goddess. Those limbs of hers, I simply have to remove them." Korekio slashed at her several times until he apparently landed a hit on one of her arms. She lashed out and struck him with such force he bounced into the glass pane and fell straight to the floor. Kaito took this opportunity to dash in close and shove the blade further into her arm. "You wasted your shot!" Kaede growled, throwing him into the glass like she had the masked assassin earlier. She disconnected the damaged arm from her body. "Admit defeat while you can." She picked up some weird-looking gun, attaching it to the stump. "It's a waste of our time to fight me more." "No, it's not." Kaito struggled to his feet. "You can't stop me from protecting him." "Foolishness." She shook her head. "Why go to such lengths?" "I fight in order to protect the things that are precious to me." He grasped his side as it twinged in pain. "You understand?" "It's not that complex." She narrowed her eyes. "You consider Kokichi precious to you?" "Yeah." He stood up fully. "And I promised to protect him, no matter what, even if it means I have to die. If that's what it takes, then so be it." "How sad!" Kaede cackled. "You don't even realize that that's the power of the queen bee." "The queen bee?" "The worker bee and the rabbit. What they have in common is that they're both willing to give up their lives to protect the leader. Yet still, the worker bee is completely oblivious to the fact that they are merely a worker." "What the hell are you saying? That Kokichi is some kind of queen bee?" Tsumugi opened a little alcove and peered out.
Oh, damn it. I am so totally late for this,
She grumbled.
They're really going at it out there.
A groan to her left, and she looked down.
What the? Korekio? What in the world are you doing here?
Her confused expression turned a sinister smile.
This is a big no-no.
The masked assassin's eyes widened. Ah, so he remembered their last encounter.
Akamatsu's gotten this under control, so let's get you back to where you belong.
If all you do is run away, then you won't be able to defeat me, Kaede mocked as she fired round after round at him. At the rate you're going, you will never be a good worker bee. He dove to the ground behind one of the puppets, snatching a silver gun from the wall. He fired 3 times up in the air. He could only hope she was standing where he thought she was. There was a sound of metal snapping, and a loud crash shook the floor. He stood with gasping breaths. Kaede giggled. The chandelier that he'd shot down on top of her began to lift into the air. With a grunt, she spun it around. The next thing he knew, something large and heavy was thrown onto him, and he was pinned against the wall.
I think it's about time that we bring this to an end.
Kokichi watched in horror as Kaede threw the chandelier straight into Kaito. The taller boy slumped to the ground, blood running down his head. He wasn't getting up. "Kaito, no!" he shouted. He ran straight into one of the walls of weapons. What could do it? What could do it? A grenade launcher. Despite its heavy weight, he was able to lift it and place it on his thin shoulders.
I distinctly remember telling you that wall is practically indestructible,
he heard Kaede say. That wasn't what he was going to aim at. No, that was the door. The small boy leveled the grenade launcher with the massive wooden doors, took a deep breath, and fired. Even before the smoke was gone, he'd run through. Please let this work. Please let her follow him. He slammed his hands on the elevator button, making it go down. Before the door could close, he slipped out and hid where he hoped Kaede wouldn't find him. He watched her walk out onto the stairwell, rip out the elevator doors, and jump down. Kokichi ran forward, ripping the pins out of the grenades in his arms. He dropped them down and stepped back. The air from the blast pushed his hair back. The small boy leaned forward, cautiously peering into the elevator shaft. Kaede was angrily climbing up the wall, just like a spider. With his heart in his throat, he turned on his heel and began to run towards the roof. He stopped at the railing when he heard the doors burst open behind him.
I must admit that for a brief moment there, I actually thought you had the upper hand on me. I commend your strategy.
Her limbs sparked and jerked. The explosions must have damaged them somewhat.
But now, you're simply at the end of the line. It looks as though I win. Even without any worker bees, I have survived thus far simply by using my own abilities.
I am nothing like you. She began walking towards him with a sneer. I am the true queen, the supremely powerful! She pointed her hand at him, wires poking out of her fingertips like claws.
Well, goodbye,
Kokichi Ouma! He ducked as she fired them at him. They wrapped themselves around the railing, trapping the assassin there. He grabbed her and began dragging her to the edge of the railing. They both went flying over it. The wires prevented them from plummeting to the ground. Why you? I'm sorry! Kokichi grasped her arm and the wires above it. I didn't want to hurt you, but I can't afford to lose! Then he began slamming his heel against the place where the arm connected to her shoulder. Don't do it! Kaede screamed. Stop it! With each kick, the arm slid further and further out of its socket, until it finally popped out and sent the assassin down, down, down. Rise and shine, Kaito. Wake up. How about a riddle to clear the sleep out of your eyes? Who is the queen? Kaito woke up to Kokichi running to his side. A smaller boy lifted the chandelier off of him and helped him to his feet. Thanks, Kokichi. He saw Kokichi's eyes begin to well up with tears. I've done something terrible. The taller boy brought him close in a hug as he shook. Kokichi. He braced the back of his head gently. What about all those things Kaede said? The queen bee? What was she talking about? Kokichi pulled away with a conflicted look. I'm sorry, but I don't think now is the right time. Besides, I don't even know if I'm right about this or not. His eyes fluttered closed. But as soon as I know for sure, I'm going to tell you everything. Everything I know.
Well, would you look at that? I guess she won't be the queen after all.